session. You're going to hear from some experts tonight, and then you're going to go to work, sharing your vision of what should happen at Point Malate. I think most of you know a lot about the history and why we're here, but I can tell you that I first started working on Point Malate in 1978. I helped write the nomination to the National Register of Historic Places for Winehaven Village, which was once the largest winery in the United States. And then when I got on the City Council in 1995, I went back to work on it, and I've been working on Point Malate now for the last 23 years. The good news is that we are at a place where we can see the end of the road. We have settled the litigation that had been going on for 5 years with the previous developer and the Indian tribe, and we're in the process of finding out from the public what their vision is for Point Malate, and then at some point, hopefully, we'll get to work on it and we'll carry it out. So I have one trivia question. I know some of you may know the answer because I've talked about this before, but I'm going to throw it out there. Does anybody know what Point Malate is named after? Why it's called Point Malate? Anybody know? Okay. Red Rock Island is an 8-acre island just south of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, and the rock formations there are dark red. And sometime in the way back past, some artists would collect those and grind them up and use them for color for painting. And Molate is kind of it's a seldom used old Spanish word to describe sort of a mortar and pestle that artists use to grind up minerals for colors. So the original name for what's now known as Red Rock Island was Molate Island, and the point that is a geographical feature of what we now call Point Malate was named after that former name of Red Rock Island. So for all you artists in the room, there's a connection there. Point Malate is a part of art history, so to speak. So I think with that in mind, we will go to the next speaker. I'll give it back to Richard.
Okay, thank you. Now, as you know, we have retained the services of WRT to lead this planning process. And we're going to turn the program over to them in order to get you started. I think the key to thinking about the future is the word yes, because one, the future is always coming at us. It changes, it moves in ways that we don't necessarily predict. I mean, how many of us growing up with dial telephones would have ever imagined these things as our primary means of communication? We didn't guess on this. But as time changed and things happened, we evolved to these devices from dial telephones. So you never know what the future holds. But what I've heard in conversations about Point Malate over time has been, will there be a way to preserve open space? Yes. Will there be a way to preserve historic buildings? Yes. Will there be a way to host people living there and bringing it back to life? Yes. I mean, basically every question that's been asked, when you look at that environment out there, there's an opportunity to say yes. And I can remember as a young person driving through when the space was occupied. It was by the Navy, not by Winehaven. Don't go back that far, but by the Navy, and there were people living in the cottages, and you looked up behind the cottages, and there were clothes on clotheslines, and people were actually going through day-to-day lives there. So as we think about a future for our city, a future for the children who are in our elementary schools now, we want to try and ask ourselves, where are they going to be? What kind of environment are we going to be able to create in the places where we have an opportunity to create something? And one of the things that I celebrate about being in planning at this stage of the game is that we have had a tremendous opportunity to learn from planning mistakes that we began to make after World War II, when automobiles were the primary form of conveyance, when land was cheap, and when people were moving out and away from our cities and out into cow pasture in order to develop. And that became the standard, very low density development out at the edge. And it's nice to be at a stage where people have revisited that idea and are now looking at much more sustainable, long-term living, as you see in Europe, as you see in other parts of the world where people have occupied spaces for hundreds of years. In the United States, we forgot how to do that. And now we're relearning how to do that. And so we have a whole body of information that can help us design the future and create places that are far better than they have been in the past. And I think on that basis, you want to think about how we use any net new space that comes before us for a conversation. And I'm hoping that people will think in those terms and think about how quickly things change. And these little devices are such an extraordinary symbol of that. So with that, I think the person who's going to take us through the agenda, Poonam, is with WRT. Let's let her pick up and kind of explain how the evening will go. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Before I do agenda review, Leticia is going to make an announcement.
Hi, everybody. We have a quick announcement for anybody who might need interpreting services in Spanish. We're here. Si alguien necesita servicios de interpretación en español, estamos aquí con los aparatos necesarios para proporcionar esos servicios. Gracias.
Thank you. And I also want to remind that we do have childcare assistants here at the venue if there's anybody that would like their kids to be watched while they are participating in this. So welcome everyone again. Thank you very much for committing your evening on a Wednesday. It's the hump day, but it's to this very important process. It's very nice to see all of you here. We have a pretty action-packed evening today. There's going to be a lot of activities to participate in and a lot of information that you're going to be receiving and hearing from our expert panelists that are going to come here just in a few minutes. But before that, I wanted to do a very quick overview of what the evening is going to look like. We have a panel on public open space and natural resources. Starting here in a few minutes, we have experts from the State Coastal Conservancy, ABAG, National Park Services, and Trust for Public Land, East Bay Regional Parks District, all of these agencies being represented here, and you're going to hear directly from them on topics relevant to Point Malate and this project. Following that, we have our speakers, Henry Ponarelli, who is the economist on the WRT team, who will be leading the panel, and Andy Madera, Senior Vice President with Eden Housing, as well as Vanessa from Community Housing Development Corporation. So we have a host of speakers here who are going to be giving a lot of great information. At the end of the panel discussion, we will have some time for Q&A. And all of the questions and comments that we hear today are being recorded. Somebody is going to be taking copious notes on the laptop, and then we also, if anybody needs comment cards or any additional materials to write your feedback, please let us know, get in touch with us, and we are happy to provide those supplies. I also want to welcome our team. WRT is the lead consultant in this process, but we have a wonderful and talented team that's supporting us and providing us expertise in different areas. We have civic makers here, Christelle from Civic Makers, who they are leading the digital engagement. So for those of your neighbors and fellow community members who are not able to participate in person in any of these events, we have a project website and an interactive website where there are engagement activities for you to provide feedback, and almost parallel to what we would be covering at the workshops. We have our local partners, Groundwork, here, and the whole Groundwork team that has been working very hard, very knowledgeable about the Richmond community, and they have been reaching out to a number of folks in the community and different neighborhoods, going door to door, informing the community about this process. On the team, we have, as I introduced Henry earlier, they are the economists who will be doing market analysis and providing us that economic expertise that relevant to the visioning process. We also have LSA consultants who will be looking at the environmental and ecological issues on the property. And then last but not the least, we have Parisi and Associates who will be advising us on transportation and infrastructure. And you're going to meet most of our team members tonight during the breakout session. Where is my clicker? Thank you. Just a quick overview of the process. The visioning process really is, there are some of the documents that are key and fundamental documents for this visioning process are the 1997 reuse plan and the judgment or the settlement agreement that was passed in April 2018. And just again, just to do a quick overview on where we are in the visioning process, we started we launched the visioning process back in May, last week of May, when WRT was contracted by the city to lead this process. Here we have a summary of some of the outreach that we have done till date. We had a pop-up event on June 16 to introduce the project. On June 23rd, we actually had the first community workshop that a number of you here attended, and there is material at the back of the room from that work that was presented at the workshop. This is some of the initial analysis and data that was presented at the workshop. We also later in the presentation are going to provide a summary of what we heard during that workshop and what your fellow community members told us, and a summary of that will be presented in detail a little bit later. Over 175 people attended that workshop, and some of them have continued to provide feedback via email and through the website as well. Following that, this past Monday, we had a very successful youth summit. Around 65 young people joined us at Point Molate Beach Park and engaged in visioning exercises very similar to what the first community workshop involved. They got a tour of the site, and then they also actually had a chance to explore some concepts and engage in the activities that everybody here will be engaging in later tonight. We are expecting a number of them to come later this evening to participate as well. Later, again on Monday evening, there was a third a site tour that was open to the public, and around 45 people joined the site tour. In the first community workshop, we'd heard from a number of community members that they would like to have more site tours than were initially planned. So the team and the city has very actively we have taken note of that, and we are making sure that we are providing additional tours. So we had one on Monday. We are going to have the next publicly open site tour on August 18th, and you will find the information for that on the flyers that we have. And after the August 18th, on August 27th, we have the third community workshop, which will be a follow-up from this community workshop. And you will see some progress and some concept alternatives in that workshop. And we will, at the end of the night today, we will be talking about what the next steps are and where we will go from here, and that's what really this third workshop is about. From here, I'm going to hand over to John Gibbs, principal with WRT. He's a landscape architect and urban designer, and he's going to lead the Open Space and Natural Resources panel.
Great.
And can I welcome our panelists?
Our panelists should come on up. Our panelists for open space and natural resources, come on up. This feels very formal. If you guys ever want to wander around or grab a mic, kind of do what's comfortable to you guys. Food is served, and so if anybody is hungry, we want you to be comfortable. So please grab a little bite to eat, come back to your table, pick up something for your neighbor. That's the kind of activity we're going to have tonight. So I'm really glad to welcome a pretty distinguished group of folks. Some of the things that we heard from our first workshop, and I think have just been really well articulated on the part of the community, is about the value of open space, the access to the water, access to the hillsides, native plant species that are rare and endemic to this site. There's a really important value there. And so we want to understand those resources. We want to understand those resources in the context of future, whether it's development, community and habitation, improvements for public access, whatever the future holds for Point Malate. We want to understand the role of open space as part of that. So the city looks to partners as it tries to build a network to accomplish great things. This has certainly been true in Richmond to date, whether it's the work at Rosie the Riveter, whether it's Miller Knox Park, et cetera. And so partners become very important. So we have some partners here tonight. I want to first introduce Marilyn Latta from Coastal Conservancy. Just raise your hand, that's great. Project manager and a really great organization that really gets involved, has a great history of working here in Richmond and helping communities realize open space goals. She'll tell you a little bit more about her organization. Lee Wah with ABAG, who's a Bay Trail planner. Lee is, I think, singularly responsible for miles and miles of public access around our bay. Is that a safe assertion? We're going to give you all the credit tonight. I would actually dispute that. It's all about partnerships. All about partnerships. So we're really glad to have Lee. Paul Scolari with the National Park Service. He's going to tell us a little bit about the Park Service, their role, how they get involved in projects. Alejandra Chiesa from the Trust for Public Land, another great partner. These should all be very familiar agencies and organizations and really great partners. Brian Holt with East Bay Regional Park District, and so Brian's gonna sort of close this with a few thoughts and observations. I'll have a couple of questions, and then we'll be able to have audience questions as well. So maybe to kick things off, Marilyn, do you have a mic, or is this? I think I have the mic, so I'm just gonna hand it to you.
Great. And we have that very brief PowerPoint just to show some pictures. So I think we each have about 5 minutes. Yep. Great. So again, I'm Marilyn Latta with the State Coastal Conservancy, and I wanted to share a little bit about our state agency and the partnerships that we've done with City of Richmond. And let's see, who's advancing slides? Oh, perfect. I can do that.
Hold the mic a little closer.
Great. So at first, I just wanted to mention we are a state agency, so we work on the full 1,200 miles of California coast. This is our mission statement up here: to act with others to preserve, protect, and restore the resources of the California coast, ocean, and the San Francisco Bay Area. So we're a grant-making agency. We provide grant funding for conservation projects, for environmental education, public access, Bay Trail and Water Trail. So I'd be happy, and Avra Heller's also here from the Conservancy. Raise your hand, Avra, in the back. So we'd be happy to share more information about funding programs and different opportunities that can help support this work. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about the work we've been doing out at Point San Pablo with the city. We're working on looking at re-envisioning our shorelines. Many of our shorelines in the San Francisco Bay Area have been hardened with riprap or levees or seawalls, and that oftentimes limits that habitat edge. It doesn't create a living edge and creates habitat impacts for both the terrestrial and the aquatic connections that we typically have in our bay. So this requires a lot of cost, dredging, fill that goes into the bay to create and maintain these structures. And with sea level rise, we're all increasingly concerned about the higher costs and larger amounts of gray infrastructure or fill that would need to be put in the bay. This will be necessary in certain locations, where there's just a vertical situation and resources that need to be protected, like the waterfront of San Francisco. There's not a lot of options, but in some areas we do have more space. And so what we're working on is this nature-based infrastructure or living shorelines. You can see the picture on the bottom right shows oyster reefs and eelgrass plantings that are meant to provide biological value, more species support, biodiversity, but also help with shoreline protection, actually helping to reduce wave energy, buffer and protect the shoreline, stabilize sediment. So I'll talk about a couple of projects we've done here in Richmond. Again, this is a green-gray spectrum of approaches to helping to create a living shoreline. In some areas, we might be able to use fully natural techniques like you see on the left. So just vegetation, tidal wetlands, beaches, things like that. In other areas, it might be a combination of using man-made materials, human-made materials, as well as habitat. And I'll show some examples of that with our reef balls that we're putting in the bay for oyster restoration. And then in some areas where you have limited space, there is more gray options, where we've got to look at that traditional seawall. So we're really interested in exploring this spectrum and getting back towards the more nature-based. We're working with a few key species, so a lot of these projects do focus on the native Olympia oyster, which is native to San Francisco Bay, as well as from Chile to Alaska in sheltered estuaries, and it provides a lot of habitat structure for many other species. We're also pulling out derelict creosote pilings and old wharf structures, such as the Red Rocks warehouse that we removed at Point San Pablo, and then Terminal 4, which is planned for removal at Point San Pablo. So these are non-functioning at this point. They're falling into the bay. It's a marine debris problem. It's an environmental problem. And so we're trying to remove those old structures and replace them with this habitat technique. And then last, tidal wetlands, Pacific cordgrass, and those important tidal marsh plants are involved in many of the designs. So I just want to show a couple pictures from the first project we constructed right across the bay in San Rafael. This is a 1-acre oyster and eelgrass restoration project. We constructed it in 2012. Many good partners, including San Francisco State, UC Davis, and a whole host of others. 17 local, state, and federal partners on the project. And we're using some of these interesting looking materials to create oyster reefs in the bay. So on the left, you can see clean Pacific oyster half shell that we've placed into bags and then put out into mounds in the bay. And then on the right, there's 4 different types of these gray-green artificial elements. These are made from a combination of Portland cement and then native sand and native oyster shell that's mined from the bay. The reef balls are the main. We're also using something we call oyster blocks. So those top 2 pictures are what we're actually actively fabricating and producing right now to put out at the Red Rocks site. And these projects, the San Rafael project, within 5 years, we had over 4 million native oysters, an increase in 10 taxa, so many species, shrimp, crabs, Dungeness crabs rearing on the reefs. We had great physical results, including the reefs reducing wave energy by about 30%, and then providing habitat for many invertebrates, plants, birds on up the food chain. So we've been very pleased with the results. And we're taking those results and applying them to some projects here on the Richmond shoreline. So in fall of 2016, we worked with the city and many partners to remove the old Red Rocks warehouse, which is on the northern tip of Point San Pablo. Ducks Unlimited helped to manage that construction and other partners, and we removed about 450 tons of debris in terms of pilings, concrete, the old wharf structure, and then about 480 pilings that were creating a toxic problem for aquatic wildlife due to the creosote on the pilings. And as a follow-up to that project, we're installing a living shoreline. So this summer, it's actually September, October, we're looking to install the oyster reef elements I just showed and some eelgrass plantings to bring back that habitat type. And then lastly, I just want to mention Terminal 4. You can see these pictures here. So Red Rocks is on the northern tip of this top right picture. And then Terminal 4 is the largest derelict structure in the bay. It's about 2,500 pilings, very large wharf and warehouse. So we've been actively working with the city, BCDC, many other partners to plan for the removal of that structure. We're in the design phase now. We hope to remove the structure sometime fall of 2020, 2021. It's a multi-million-dollar project to get it out, at least $5 million. So we've got to do some fundraising, and that's why it's so important for the local and state partnerships to occur. And then last, I just want to mention the Giant Marsh Living Shorelines project. That's a little bit north on the North Richmond shoreline near Point Pinole. That's where we're further testing oyster beds, eelgrass plantings, as well as tidal marsh and upland ecotone plantings. So really looking for habitat connectivity and sort of this shoreline protection approach. So those are the pictures I wanted to show and just a brief information about these types of projects, just as some examples of the types of conservation work that's already occurring out at near Point Malate and that we hope to see more of. So thanks so much. Happy to answer questions. Who's next?
All right, good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name's Lee Huo. I'm with the San Francisco Bay Trail Project. I'm just going to go through some brief history. I don't have as many slides as the previous speaker, so I'm just going to show you some maps and talk a little bit about the history of the Bay Trail Project and what is planned for the entire region of the Bay Area, as well as this particular space over in the city of Richmond. So as you can see here, it's a very regional project. The plan is to build a 500-mile biking, walking shoreline trail that encircles the entire San Francisco Bay. It travels through 9 counties in the Bay Area, 47 cities, and is planned to cross all 7 bridges of the Bay Area toll bridges in the region. As you can see with the map for the city of Richmond, quite a bit of the Bay Trail is completed in the city of Richmond. I believe right now we have 24 miles of 34 miles completed, and Point Malate is one of the last gaps here that has not been built yet. I'm actually very glad that John brought up the whole concept of who builds this trail. And just to give you an example of how much partnership and how critical it is in development of the Bay Trail, just in some of the projects that are moving ahead nearby here in the city of Richmond, some of you may have seen some of the work that's happening building the trail on the north side of the Interstate 580 area between Castro Street and Point Malate. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission, in partnership with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, as well as the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, have worked on developing that particular segment trail. It's scheduled to be open in 2019. Even at Point Malate, the East Bay Regional Park District, I don't want to get into it too much since Brian's going to probably talk a little bit about that, is working on developing a segment of the Bay Trail at Point Malate that's going to reach where this particular piece of land is located right now. And the city of Richmond is going to be developing the other segment through that region. Throughout the Bay Area, though, it requires much partnership. There's always a huge variety of public agencies, including some private partnerships as well, and funding from multiple sources. The Coastal Conservancy has been a key funder of the Bay Trail for many years. Since the early 2000s, they've provided millions of dollars for grant programs for the Bay Trail so that we are occasionally a funder. We're hopeful, of course, with the passage of Prop 68, that will continue in the near future so that we can help move ahead some of the great projects that we know. One of the things about the Bay Trail also is that it's not just a recreational trail, it's also considered a commute corridor at this point. It's included in regional bicycle plans for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. It's in the Contra Costa County Transportation Authority's bicycle and pedestrian plan. It's also in the city of Richmond's bicycle plan. So it is important not only as a recreational corridor, but as a different way for people to get around the region. The Point Molate stretch has been included in the Bay Trail plan since its adoption back in 1989. It's a concept that's been long coming. Regardless of what this process develops in terms of creating a space at Point Molate, the Bay Trail is going to be an integral part of that. We just see the area as some place that is going to attract people there regardless of what it becomes in the future. And the Bay Trail we see as a critical component of that because people do want to get to the shoreline. It's one of the reasons why Bay Trail is well supported through many of the communities that, as it goes through, and one of the reasons why it's developed so well in the city of Richmond with support of both the city government here, other regional partners and state partners and federal partners, as well as the community here, as we've seen from a lot of the activity that the Trails for Richmond Action Committee has committed to putting forward the Bay Trail. So we really appreciate that and look forward to working with the community here to develop the Bay Trail. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about the slide here for the Bay Trail extension for this region.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Scolari, and I work for the National Park Service, obviously. This week, I'm the acting superintendent of Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historical Park, but my permanent role is that I lead the programs for historic resource management, historic preservation, natural resource preservation, and the planning program as well. And I'm continuing the trend. I have no slides, so I don't know where we're going from here, but I'll just say a few words without the aid of slides. Obviously, the core mission of the National Park Service in Richmond is to operate Rosie the Riveter Park and to tell the story, to preserve the places associated with the World War II home front and to tell that story. But beyond that, we do stretch out and do some additional things. One of those is that we provide historic preservation technical support to the city. So I actually sit on the Historic Preservation Commission for the city of Richmond, and I know that this project, the Point Molate project, has several historic resources connected to it, and so that's an area where we might provide some assistance and where I can answer questions tonight if you're interested in that. One of the main things we do as the National Park Service is we tell stories. And so in addition to telling that core story of World War II in Richmond, we also expand out a little bit beyond that, and you'll find that on the Bay Trail, for example, we have interpretive waysides where we tell stories that get a little further afield from Richmond, from World War II. And so we'll connect with, we partner with the Bay Trail, and we partner with the East Bay Regional Park District in Richmond, and we get involved in telling stories. And then finally, beyond that, continuing with that theme of partnership, we work regularly with the City of Richmond and East Bay Regional Park District and the Bay Trail and the community, and we consider ourselves a part of the community, and so wherever there's a niche for us to be participating in something, we will get involved in that as well. So that's why I'm here tonight. I'm happy to be here and happy to have a discussion after the presentations.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm Alejandra Chiesa, Bay Area Program Director with the Trust for Public Land, and we've been following Point Molate for a while, and it's great to see the progress. It's great to see the continued engagement from the community and leadership from the city. and the progress that has been made. The Trust for Public Land focuses on creating parks and conserving land for people. It's about people, it's about livable communities. In the Bay Area, we have done a lot of projects, but I have to say one of our most dear partnerships is with the City of Richmond and all the organizations and residents of Richmond. We have a Climate Smart Cities partnership with the city where we engaged a lot of groups in helping create this GIS-based decision support tool to look at where best to invest for multiple benefit green infrastructure projects. We've done some parks, JFK, always working in partnership with other groups, the JFK Park, Harbor 28, and recently we secured a grant in partnership with the National Park Service and the city for implementing the Richmond Wellness Trail, which is gonna bring people from the heart of Richmond to the shoreline. Let me tell you a little bit about how we work. I know a lot of people think that we manage land. Well, we don't do that, we do other things. We do planning, always with deep community engagement, kind of to generate community-supported visions for parks. We generate funding. We're not a funder, but we are able to, for example, we led with many other groups and partners here the passing of Proposition 68, which will generate $4 billion for water, parks, and conservation. And I think that's gonna be a source of funding for Point Molate in the future. We also apply for public and private grants. We protect land. That's how the Trust for Public Land started, by acquiring land and then transferring it to other entities for management and conservation. So we don't hold the land, but we help with that process of getting the funding for acquisition and then transferring it. And we create parks, so hiring contractors and building the parks, always with community engagement. I also wanted to point out that it's not just about land. Land brings multiple benefits to people and communities. There's environmental benefits, there's community benefits, there's health benefits, not only physical health, but mental health. There's economic benefits, and there's other benefits that are really hard to quantify, you know, about culture and arts and culture and creative placemaking and inspiration. So I want to say that Point Molate has a lot of amazing assets and opportunities. There's beautiful views, there's a rich history, there's amazing habitats, and there's also challenges that the community together and the leadership need to figure out, you know, access, figuring out, you know, access, there's the presence of Chevron and many other things. But it's very important to look at all this with an equity and access lens. You know, who's gonna be accessing those benefits and who you're benefiting. And I see that this community is really delving into those topics because I was looking at all the comments from the previous workshops, and I think those are conversations that are ongoing. So thank you for continuing to be part of it, and thank you for having me.
Good evening, thank you. My name's Brian Holt. I'm a Chief of Planning at the East Bay Regional Park District. This is a really great panel. We've got grant-making agencies, regional planning agencies, the storytellers at National Park Service, great national park or nonprofit partners, and East Bay Regional Park District. We do manage land. So we're a two-county agency, Contra Costa and Alameda County. We have 73 parks within that area, over 121,000 acres, and 1,200 miles of trails, including about 200 miles of the sort of inter-park trails that connect parks to communities. And we receive about 25 million visitors annually. So our mission is up there really to preserve the rich heritage of natural and cultural resources and provide open spaces, parks, trails, safe and healthful recreation and environmental education. And we're really proud of the environmental ethic that we have at the agency that guides what we do. Point Malate has been an area of interest to my agency for some time. It's been included as a potential parkland on our master plan. We are, as Lee mentioned, currently in design for phase 1 of the Bay Trail through Point Malate that will connect to the Point Malate Beach Park. So this has been an area that we're excited to work on. And did want to mention, we did engage and partner with the City of Richmond, Coastal Conservancy, Muir Heritage Land Trust, and Chevron in what was then the Point San Pablo Peninsula Open Space Committee, generated the Point San Pablo Peninsula Open Space Study, and really came out with a recommendation of a permanently protected open space and park facility on the San Pablo Peninsula. So we're excited to continue to partner with the city and with the community and with everybody else to see what the future of Point Malate is. And so with that.
Thank you. Round of applause for our panelists. I'll just hang on to that. And you know, I'm just impressed how many projects are already going on out at Point Malate. When we were all out there on the tours in the first workshop, people talked about bicycle access, if we could have trails, if we could just get here. And as we were assembling this panel, you know, we became more aware of a number of these projects that are already in place, and you guys have spoken to tonight. So I feel really positive. There's already some momentum. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do, but we have a demonstration of some great partnerships: building oyster reefs, the Bay Trail, the beach park, which is already built and open and has ongoing improvements, removal of piles for ecological benefit. So, you know, I think that. You know, I think that the value of these agencies in partnership with the city is about you know, helping provide not only sort of the guidance, the example, the precedent, but the connections to funding. I don't need to repeat myself too much, but I think this is a group that's already showed us the way, how to connect to funding, that there's opportunities to provide funding through these partnerships. I just had a couple of questions. And then I want to open it up to some folks in the audience, so get a question ready, and we'll get a microphone over to you, and hold the microphone close to your close to your mouth. And I guess I was interested in you guys answering the question about, as this vision moves forward for community to exist out there, where are some other examples like this, where there's I think future partnership between homes that are built and open space that is preserved and access that is provided? Are there some other pretty cool examples around the Bay Area that we might want to be aware of?
Somebody else? East Bay Regional Park District, we work really closely with the different cities, communities, and trying to balance, I guess, the need for some level of housing or economic development and really preserving those most critical open spaces. So a number that are in the planning process worked closely with the City of Concord on the Concord Reuse Project, so a military base there that's preserves over 70% of the property as open space, but still provides for pretty substantial level of development. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I will do my best. So a number of examples that are in the planning process, and then I'll just say, you know, one of the big examples is of success of habitat conservation and related to urban development is the Habitat Conservation Plan in East Contra Costa County, which we have worked with the county and the member cities out in that area and have protected, I think, over 10,000 acres in the past 10 years. That have all been, that's been transferred over as a result of basically development impact fees and mitigation. So with that, did you?
Yeah. I have another example. Can you hear me? It's not the same as Point Molate. It's different in many ways, but it's an example of public-private partnership with a lot of partners, and a combination of mixed-use development and open space, and that's India Basin, and it's in planning process, and actually the planning process is funded by the Coastal Conservancy, and it includes a partnership between a private developer building the Trust for Public Land, the City of San Francisco through the Rec Park Department, and the San Francisco Parks Alliance. So there's, forming that partnership took a long time and a lot of very clarifying roles and responsibilities, but things that the community is benefiting from is some, there's a community benefits package, so the developer is paying for a lot of the design costs, and there may be some management that could be done, and in other fees that could be helping with the management of all the open space.
Questions from the audience? A couple of hands are up. Poonam's going to run the mic around.
Want to take that one?
So I think it's great that the city has assembled a group like you who have a lot of experience with open space and how to enhance it and how to best protect it. And so it would be wonderful if we could, through these workshops, have an actual product that'll come out. So for example, there's a tremendous opportunity in the south part of Point Malate where there's a intact watershed that goes all the way down to where the eelgrass beds are on the beach, in front of the beach. This is a situation where connectivity comes in, where we want to protect the natural values. There's a lot of wildlife out there. There's a lot of natural plant life and a lot of interesting small wildlife, waterfowl, and as well as osprey. We have like a tremendous opportunity to do this. Now the city has talked about putting housing at the base of that watershed, which would be a terrible thing to do because it would interfere with the connectivity that we're talking about. And you're the very people who could help us put this together so that if we're going to end up having a whole lot of construction, which we will, we should put that all over near the Winehaven district where we need a rehabilitation of the Winehaven district and not put it out in the south end where we're going to destroy a perfectly good watershed. So I'd like to hear what you might have to say about what you can do to assist the citizens to avoid a mistake, a planning mistake, and to enhance and protect the current open space that we have.
Poonam, do you have one more lined up, and then I'll do the next on this side?
Can you, yeah. I'm really glad you brought up that area. That eelgrass bed is an important resource in the whole Bay Area as well as Richmond. I know Kathy Boyer with San Francisco State has brought her graduate students out to monitor that bed for the past many years. So it's an excellent area for preservation, protection, restoration, as well as graduate studies and technical field work. So, I think from the Coastal Conservancy's perspective, we would love to see a balanced mix there where there's appropriate siting of elements to best protect that eelgrass bed, the shoreline edge, and open space in that area. So I agree that that's a critical piece that should be well considered thoughtfully as the final plans are developed.
One on this side and then over there. And I just wanted to point out, I think we can take 3 more questions right now, then we need to move on to the next panel. We are going to have more Q&A time at the end of the second panel.
Hi, this is about the Bay Trail. So I appreciate the work that's been done already, and I know this is a long-term project, but I would like to mention that currently, as planned, the Bay Trail would end kind of at the yacht club or the marina, and it would not connect back to the city of Richmond. So in order to access it, the residents of Richmond would have to go down to Point Richmond, come up, and then they'd have to come back where it's been discussed, and I think it is feasible if we can get Chevron to agree to it, and I think we could, and I think we should try and commit ourselves to trying to follow from where the marina currently is, and we've got plans for the Bay Trail already, to follow the Chevron railroad bed, which is right there still. It's still sitting there, the railroad tracks. Follow them down, and then you just have an elevated platform, which would not be that long, over the mud flats, and go right into the city of Richmond, kind of on the north side. And I think that would really connect the community up to Point Malate in a way that, because you're filling in the gaps of the Bay Trail and you're leaving a big gap there. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
All right, thank you very much for bringing that question up. I'm sure that's something that people have thought about for many, many years, and it's been brought up just through discussions in many different situations that I can remember. I think it's pretty obvious that it would be fantastic to create a bay trail that loops around that peninsula. But the reality of it is that it is private property at this point. It's owned, as you mentioned, by Chevron and a few, I think there's one other ownership that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. So for that to be able to occur, it would probably require conversations and agreement from Chevron and with the city of Richmond. And as far as I know, there are no conversations like that going on at this moment. That doesn't mean it can't happen in the future, though.
I would like to envision a joint effort with involving almost all of you, but I'm not going to name all of your agencies. I'll just start it. You'll see where I'm going. I would like to see East Bay Regional Park District take the property using eminent domain. It is public property now. It's about to become privatized. So I think you should take it. It's a jewel. It's got the best views in the entire Bay Area of San Francisco, San Rafael, Mount Tamalpais. It shouldn't just be for a few wealthy people. Just take the property, team up with the Coastal Conservancy and, the other entity that can fund projects. Use that money to help remediate the parts that need to be remediated, the historical parts. Partner with academic institutions and do like what they've done in many others such as at the Golden Gate National Recreation Center, where they turned Fort Cronkite into a public facility. We can have research centers there, we can have history museums there, we can have art museums, we can have classes. And yes, absolutely, find a way to get transportation out there so the people in this city who do not have enough public space and parks have a beautiful jewel on the bay that people will come to and they will spend money at if you set it up right. Thank you.
There's a question here, and this would be the last question in this round. Then we go to the next panel.
I'd like to raise the issue of the difference between open space and ecologically critical environmental values that exist out there at Point Malate. Because you mentioned Kathy Boyer, and actually on Saturday, when we had our Point Malate Alliance meeting, she was one of our expert speakers. And we talked about the connectivity between the southern watershed and this best protected and best preserved eelgrass beds in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she, as somebody who's been out there 15 years, as really the lead scientist on that, said that, as many other scientific studies have shown, that if you have housing development in that watershed, that you're going to have sedimentation, you're going to have water quality decline, you're going to have loss. And clearly our number one, I hope everybody reads the Point Malate Alliance position. Number one is conserve the South Valley watershed and coastal bluffs to maintain stability of native California grasslands and the adjacent eelgrass beds and the enhancements of SF Bay water quality, which I like the National Park Service and the Coastal Conservancy and East Bay Parks to just acknowledge the reality that when you put impervious structures, when you start building housing in unique watersheds like that, that you'll see inevitable decline of the offshore eelgrass beds. That's what Kathy's telling us. And unfortunately, it's not about 70% open space. The most ecologically sensitive parts of Point Malate are in this settlement where they want to build hundreds of high-rise condos and do lots of development. And we just believe a public process should be balancing the environment, the economy, and equity. And equity means that the full community gets to develop the future. You don't get with pre-arranged plans to attack these valuable spaces. So I hope, as agencies committed to natural resource protection, that you'll acknowledge that we can't protect the eelgrass beds unless we protect the watersheds that connect them.
Okay, I'm going to do one more out of that group. You guys want to make a decision between you? Who's going to be able to do one more? Was there a question? Yeah? You guys want to agree, gentlemen? I want to do this as democratic as possible.
John, we just want to wait for a response first,
Okay.
and then we...
So I believe the question was an acknowledgement of the importance of the eelgrass beds and that housing in that area can impact it. That's what you're looking for. I think, the Park District, I think we would, certainly agree that an intact watershed is important. The eelgrass beds are important. And, throughout the environmental review process and the planning process, that's certainly something that we would be interested in considering and minimizing any potential impacts there. So,
I completely agree. I also, I have not been as engaged in the vision process, so I'm not at all taking a stand on any action that occurs, except to push for strong conservation and protection of these resources. I would mention that many urban areas and developments are considering green infrastructure themselves, bioswales, settling ponds, more filtering that naturally will help with that runoff before it gets to the eelgrass bed. So I would hope that there could be thoughtful considerations.
Yeah, and this is not to be evasive, but these, I think these guys are really much more engaged in what's been happening in Point Malate over the years. The East Bay Regional Park District, as an example, is actually looking at managing land there. The National Park Service is much more marginal to this situation, so I'm not even that familiar with the specific issues that are natural resources issues that are going on there. I would just say in a general sense that what you're saying makes sense, and I think what you said also makes a lot of sense, is that when you get into the nitty-gritty of a planning process, you try and figure out what can work for a variety of different values, and hopefully that's where this process is heading.
Great. And these are important positions that you guys are all putting forward. This is very much relevant to our process, and thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited I got to ask with this panel because I really appreciate this panel here and that you're all here together. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to ask that all of you find a way to join forces. For example, we're just talking about the national parks, not really knowing what's going on at Point Malate. I want to ask for all of you to try to work together and make partnerships. I saw recently where the Coastal Conservancy was giving grants to provide affordable overnight shoreline access. This would be a perfect resource for Point Malate. We could, if we got funding, if we got a land trust and got funding from all of you working in partnership, there's really so much that we could do. And The fact that the National Parks is interested in historic preservation and telling the stories. You know, we've got the shrimp camps there, we've got the Ohlone history there, and we don't want that history to be lost. And then one last thing, Bay Trail, I know that Chrissy Field has changed over to a permeable surface called Park Tread, and I was hoping that National Park people could work with East Bay Regional people to try to figure out more how we can have permeable surfaces in every place possible at Point Molate. It's less damaging to put them in. It's a more natural surface, but you still have public access. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, there's a lot of very good detailed ideas that are important, whether it's permeable paving, whether it's an intact watershed and a connection between the uplands, the shoreline, and the eel beds. This is good. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, panelists, for being here. My name is Andres Soto with Communities for a Better Environment. And just by a show of hands, how many of you think building 650 to 1,500 residential units on the southern development area is sound environmental stewardship? Just raise your hand if you think that's the case. Not you, Don. I'm asking the panelists. Thank you.
I'm not sure that was a fair question of our agency partners, but thank you for the question. Panelists, certainly with an open space, thank you guys for your participation here. Don't leave yet, because we're going to talk a little bit about some land economics, and there may be some more synthesis here. You know, as we talk about open space and we talk about natural resources, in the context of the project, which at this point still includes a development component, right? And I know many of us don't want to talk about that, but that is the purpose of this process, is to envision both.